Welcome to Klepper's Corner, the only show where history doesn't just repeat, it begs us to stop inviting it over for dinner. Today, we're flipping through the scorched, blood-soaked, and occasionally inspirational pages of July 18th. That's right, this date is basically the Swiss Army knife of history. It has everything: fire, war, religious declarations, bankruptcies, gymnastics, mass shootings, and, just to make sure we're not all crying, Nelson Mandela. So buckle up as we take a trip from ancient Rome to modern Silicon Valley with a detour through fascism, colonialism, Olympic greatness, and the kind of congressional logic that makes you ask, what if the line of presidential succession was decided by a particularly chaotic game of musical chairs? Let's dive in. Rome gets roasted twice. Let's go all the way back to 387 BC. Rome, the land of togas, senators, and indoor plumbing that still beats most airport bathrooms, gets humiliated at the Battle of Alea by the Gallic Celts. Rome had offended the wrong people, which in ancient times was easy. Just exist while wearing sandals. The result? The Gauls sacked the city, stole the pizza recipes, and left Rome sobbing into its stone pillow. Flash forward to 64 AD, because history is nothing if not a glutton for punishment, and Rome catches fire again. The Great Fire of Rome rages for 3 days. It destroyed most of the city, and naturally, Emperor Nero was accused of fiddling while it burned, which raises the question, did they even have fiddles? That's like blaming someone for tweeting during Pompeii. But Nero did what any good leader would do during a disaster. He blamed a religious minority, cracked down on civil liberties, and used it to justify urban redevelopment. In today's terms, he was just a hair's breadth from turning the ashes into condos and starting a podcast called Arsonomics. The Pope is never wrong unless he's been canceled. Jump to 1870, when the First Vatican Council dropped a doctrine like it was the hottest new TikTok trend: papal infallibility. That's right, the Pope is now officially never wrong, as long as he's talking about morals or faith and sitting in the Pope chair. It's like hot takes, but with eternal consequences. You see, ultramontanists, yes, real name, not a failed Renaissance ska band, were tired of bishops' freelancing doctrine and decided the Pope needed full creative control. The Gallicans, the church's original skeptics, said, hold on, what about that one Pope who totally messed up? And the Vatican responded, shh, infallible now, move along. It was the 19th century version of toggling on God mode in a video game. Except instead of slaying dragons, you're just really, really sure about transubstantiation. Segment 3. Mein Kampf drops. World history weeps. On July 18th, 1925, Adolf Hitler released Mein Kampf, which is German for My Struggle, though a more accurate translation might be a racist Yelp review of the world. Written in prison after the beer hall putsch, a failed coup that sounds more like a brewery-themed food truck festival. This book laid out Hitler's twisted ideology: anti-Semitism, Aryan supremacy, and a foreign policy based on, let's invade everyone who isn't me. It didn't sell well at first, probably because the early reviews were like, this guy seems unhinged. But then Hitler came to power, made it mandatory reading, and boom, instant bestseller. It was the original algorithmic nightmare. If Facebook had existed in 1933, it would have been pushing Mein Kampf between cat videos and anti-vax memes. This wasn't just a book, it was the user manual for genocide, a chilling reminder that giving a failed artist a platform can have catastrophic results. Looking at you, Twitter. Segment 4, the Marne Ultimatum, Germany gets a timeout. Meanwhile, back in 1918, World War I is dragging on like a group text with too many old people. July 18th marks the end of the Second Battle of the Marne, where the Allies finally decided enough was enough. Led by French General Ferdinand Foch, because nothing inspires victory like a name that sounds like it's halfway to being censored, the Allied forces pushed Germany into retreat. It was a pivotal moment. The war shifted in favor of the Allies, and Germany lost its last shot at being the world's worst roommate. This battle was like when the substitute teacher finally snaps and says, everyone sit down or I'm calling the principal. Except in this case, the principal is America, and the detention is trench warfare. Segment 5, India and Pakistan, the world's most traumatizing roommate split. Let's talk about 1947. British Parliament, in a final act of we're sorry but also not really, passed the India Independence Act. It split British India into India and Pakistan and basically said, you two work it out, good luck, cheerio. What followed was the largest mass migration in human history, with 15 million people uprooted and over 2 million killed in communal violence. Religious divides, political betrayal, and maps drawn with rulers instead of reason created a humanitarian catastrophe. It's like giving a divorce decree and then tossing both parties into the same house with one bathroom and one cricket bat. And people still wonder why post-colonial states have trust issues. This wasn't just a breakup. It was a full-on identity crisis written in blood, bureaucracy, and British smugness. Segment 6, America rethinks who gets the nuclear codes. Also in 1947, Harry Truman decided maybe we should know who becomes president if things go sideways, in case someone trips over the nuclear football. So he signed the Presidential Succession Act, updating the order of who takes over if the president dies, resigns, or spontaneously combusts from watching Fox News. Now, instead of just passing it down like a family heirloom, the Speaker of the House became second in line. Which means today, if something happens to the president and vice president, the next person running the country is probably someone with very strong feelings about gas stoves. Segment 7, Florence Blanchfield breaks the brass ceiling. In 1947, the same year Truman was drawing up presidential contingency plans, the U.S. military made an even bolder move. It promoted a woman. I know, next they'll be letting women vote or drive tanks. On July 18th, Florence Blanchfield became the first woman in U.S. history to hold a permanent commission in the Army. And no, not honorary, not Nurse Barbie gets a ribbon, a real deal officer-level salute or else rank. The Pentagon was so shocked it briefly thought it had been infiltrated by common sense. Blanchfield had served since World War I and finally got what she deserved decades later. This was a massive leap forward for gender equality, even though the Army brass probably still thought feminism was a type of camouflage pattern. Segment 8, Intel is born. So is the modern attention span. Jump ahead to 1968. While everyone else was dropping acid, Robert Noyce and Gordon Moore were dropping silicon wafers. That's right, Intel was born, and not in a garage. Sorry, Apple. Sometimes greatness starts in a semiconductor facility with reasonable dental coverage. Intel gave us microprocessors, microchips, and micro attention spans. Without Intel, you wouldn't be watching this on a phone while ignoring your friends and Googling symptoms of doom. They coined the phrase Intel inside, and oh boy, did they mean it. Because now it's inside your car, your fridge, your toaster, your Roomba, your toilet, probably reading this script and deciding whether I'm a threat to the algorithm. It also started Silicon Valley's whole move fast, break things, and invent 12 new types of passwords philosophy. Segment 9, Chappaquiddick, the original political car crash. 1969. The moon landing was days away, but Senator Ted Kennedy decided to do his own version of leaving Earth. On July 18, Kennedy drove off a bridge on Chappaquiddick Island. He escaped the car. His passenger, Mary Jo Kopechne, didn't. And here's the kicker. Ted didn't report the accident for 10 hours. 10 hours. That's not I panicked. That's I went to brunch, took a nap, called my lawyer, and still had time to write a speech. This wasn't just a tragedy. It was a career-sinking iceberg disguised as a wooden bridge. Kennedy would go on to become the lion of the Senate, but his presidential aspiration sank in that pond, right next to whatever was left of public trust. It's a classic American story. 1 part privilege, 1 part scandal, and 3 parts, how did this guy stay in office? Segment 10, Nadia and the perfect 10 no one believed. Let's lighten things up with one of the few feel-good moments in Olympic history not immediately followed by a doping scandal. On July 18, 1976, 14-year-old Romanian gymnast Nadia scored the first perfect 10 in Olympic history. And the scoreboard said 1.00, because, and I swear this is true, they didn't think perfection was even possible. That's like making a dating app that maxes out at pretty good. Kich didn't just flip, she flipped the sport on its head. She made gymnastics younger, more daring, and more terrifying to parents everywhere. And she did it all during the Cold War, while representing a brutal communist regime. That's right, she stuck the landing while the Romanian government tried to stick the landing on basic human rights. This wasn't just athletic achievement. It was a metaphor for excellence in the face of everything designed to crush it. Segment 11, San Ysidro Massacre, America's other deadly addiction. Now for something darker. On July 18, 1984, James Huberty walked into a McDonald's in San Ysidro, California, and opened fire, killing 21 people and injuring 19. It remains one of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history, and it happened before most Americans even had cable. And yes, the killer had a history of mental illness. Yes, he had military-style weapons. And yes, the conversation around guns afterward was basically thoughts, prayers, Big Macs, still $1.99. This massacre wasn't just a tragedy, it was an omen. A glimpse into the dark future of American gun violence. We were shocked back then. Now it barely makes a headline. Welcome to the only country where mass shooting is considered both a policy failure and a marketing opportunity for bulletproof backpacks. Segment 12. Agatai Uwilingiyimana. Bravery in the face of horror. In 1993, Agatai Uwilingiyimana became Rwanda's first and only female prime minister. A woman in power in a patriarchal post-colonial nation, that's like being a fish who applies for a lifeguard job. She was smart, principled, and moderate, so naturally, extremists hated her. And just 9 months later, she was assassinated in the opening hours of the Rwandan genocide. Her death marked the beginning of one of the worst mass killings in modern history. Uwilingiyimana fought for women's rights and education. She tried to bridge divides in a country cracking in half. But in a world addicted to hate and tribalism, bridge builders are often the first to fall. We remember her not just because she was the first, but because she was brave enough to be the last voice of reason before the storm. Segment 13, Detroit declares bankruptcy, Motor City breaks down. On July 18, 2013, the city of Detroit filed for bankruptcy. Not just broke, municipally, epically, historically bankrupt. $20 billion in debt. The kind of broke where even monopoly wouldn't let you pass go. Years of industrial collapse, population flight, and political mismanagement finally caught up with the Motor City. Once a symbol of American innovation, Detroit became the symbol of, let's call it, post-capitalist burnout. Public services collapsed, pensioners panicked, and buildings were so abandoned they started doing ghost tours with actual squatters as part of the attraction. Detroit eventually clawed its way back, but it's still a warning. When your city depends on one industry, and that industry decides it's cheaper to make cars in space, you're toast. Segment 14, Mandela Day, the global reminder we needed. And finally, something that gives us hope that humanity isn't just a lost cause in pants. July 18th is Nelson Mandela International Day, a day to honor a man who spent 27 years in prison, then forgave his captors, dismantled apartheid, and rebuilt a nation without lighting it on fire. Mandela stood for peace, equality, reconciliation, and the idea that real strength isn't about domination, it's about endurance and compassion. The UN even created the Nelson Mandela rules for prisoner treatment in his honor, because if anyone knew how not to run a prison, it was the guy who spent nearly 3 decades in one and still came out ready to govern. Mandela Day isn't just a holiday, it's a challenge. It asks, what are you doing with your freedom? Because he used his to make the world better. What are we doing? Fighting about gas stoves on Twitter. In conclusion, July 18, the day that did too much. So there you have it, July 18, a date so historically busy, it needs a nap and a therapist. We watched empires fall and corporations rise. We saw the best and worst of what humanity can offer. Nazis and nurses, genocides and gymnasts, Silicon Valley and scorched cities. And we cap it off with Nelson Mandela, reminding us that despite all the fires, all the wars, and all the stupidity, there's still a chance to get it right. So maybe take 67 minutes today to make something better. Or at the very least, don't burn down Rome while blaming someone else. Thanks for watching Klepper's Corner. History doesn't repeat, but man, it sure loves a reboot.